I didn't even remember this until I watched old footage that they showed off way back when. I mean, shit, this was like high school or so, like mid-high school. For me anyway. Would have been late high school for you, Jeff. So, many years after originally being canceled by Konami, who was the publisher that wanted to pick it up and publish it back in, like, I think it was like, 2007 or something like that. 6 Days in Fallujah, which is a game based on the real conflict during the Iraqi War that was/is laden with accusations of U.S. war crimes and other issues, is being released this year by a developer headed up by Destiny and Halo veterans. So they're not releasing the one from fucking 13 years ago, but they've resurrected the project in some way, shape, or form, and are looking to release that this year. Sergeant Eddie Garcia, who was not only in the battle, or battles, I should say, for that matter, but also wounded during, originally proposed the game back in 2005. So it was his idea back in 2005 that kicked off that original game before Konami shut it down. And the reason why Konami shut it down was because they were getting apparently, and you have to think about the timeline. This was before social media was wild, right? So they were getting blown up, they said, with like an enormous amount of phone calls and letters, emails, what have you, about from people who were not happy with the fact that such a contentious part of the Iraqi war was going to be what they considered glorified in video game form. And sold, and a lot of the people that were complaining, or stating that they weren't happy with it were people that were family members of, like, soldiers that were lost, during that war, etc., etc. So, Konami looked at that and went, yeah, you know what? Maybe this ain't worth, whether we release it and people see that it's not necessarily glorifying, but they're hoping to give an idea of people of what it was like actually being there, etc., etc. Maybe we don't want to take on all of that risk, and so they canned it. So anyway, this Sergeant Eddie Garcia was the one who originally brought that up back then, and that was the game was originally based on. And then more than 100 Marines, soldiers, and Iraqi civilians have shared their stories to help shape the game. The hope is that the game helps get across the difficulties of that conflict, not just physically, of course, but morally and ethically as well. Now, I have my own notes here because I just wrote it down while I was watching the old development videos and stuff. I'm not 100% sure how I personally feel about this, and this is like almost verbatim what I have written down here, but if Call of Duty can do what they do, and if this really is attempting to be more sincere and true to reality, then perhaps it's a good thing in that regard. But it'll be impossible to tell until we have the game out and see how they're treating it. Are they really, how much of it is glorified and how much of it is, I think the thing that a lot of people are probably concerned about is how much are they going to skirt around the war crimes that the U.S. were allegedly involved in during that conflict. Because, if it's like Call of Duty and some of those other games in the past, or movies, for example, like, when was America, when was America the last time that, like, they had done something wrong where in a movie they just glazed right the fuck over at that point and just America, fuck yeah, coming to save the motherfucking day, yeah? It's rare. And so I think some people are concerned that for a conflict like this one that was so, in the eyes of many, blatantly the U.S. doing some bad shit, maybe making a game that glazes over that's bad. But again, we don't know until we have the game on our hands. But what's your feeling, not just necessarily on this specifically? I don't even know all of the inside. I mean, this was like, what was Fallujah was like, what, 2 to 4, I'm trying to remember, 2 to 4 years into the Iraqi war. Maybe it was like 2003. I'm like, I can't even remember all the details at this point, and I didn't have the time to refresh on that entire situation. That's a rabbit hole in 3/4 of Wikipedia pages and any other source you can get your hands on. so not just this specifically, but what is your take in general on video games taking specifically to war and portraying those in games? Do you see it as a net positive, or do you see it as a like maybe it's too much in the way of desensitizing younger people to the realities of war because they don't always portray war as war really is, right? It's kind of like, aside from a handful of movies, war is not portrayed as war really is in the movies, for example. And even in the ones that are more accurate, you're never going to get the concept of being in war. So what's your take on gaming being, trying to enter that space from like an art perspective, from what we've seen thus far in gaming anyway?
I mean, for me, it doesn't, I really don't care. I mean, if they've got a story to tell, then tell the story. People are going to bitch and complain about everything these days. Yeah, I mean, I mean, let's be real, man. Like, I'm sure tons of countries have done some really fucking shady stuff in these wars. I mean, everybody's got dirty, dark secrets and dirty things that I don't even know if it's a secret, more so that, they just a certain government probably is not a fan. I mean, you see what they do in China, right? It's the same thing they do in China. They try and censor things. They can go and make this game. In fact, I think in a time like now, I think it'd probably do better than what it would have been if they went and tried to release this back in 2005 or whenever it was.
It would have been probably closer to like 2000 and I don't know, fucking 7 or 8 if it started.
Yeah.
If he suggested it in 2005, the earliest you would think would be like 09 or 08 or something.
Yeah. So I mean, it's times are different. Like, people want to see these things. People want to see the truth or a version of whatever truth they want to try and to do. I mean, we're in a time where there's little to no censorship in terms of what you can see and what on the internet and stuff like that. Like, sure, we're also in a culture that everybody wants to censor everybody out if it's not what they like. But I think especially in today's times, like, people want to see this stuff. People want to see the gritty stuff. And hey, listen, if it's a reality and it's a story that they want to tell, then go ahead and tell it. I'm not into this whole like, oh, well, is it too bad for the kids to see? Like, come on, man. It's a fucking video game and there's a rating on it. It's no different than the movies. If the movies can go out and do it, why can't the video games go? And the video games have gone out and done it. I mean, there's tons of video games out there that have Americans doing some really fucking shady stuff and doing some, like, especially in Call of Duty.
Well, Call of Duty, the mission No Russian, for example, that is like the most controversial mission of Call of Duty. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody gives a shit, right? Like, when I say nobody, I mean, like, collectively, like, Call of Duty is still pumping games out more than ever. So, go ahead and make your game, or don't be a bitch if you want. And go and make another game of killing Nazis.
In fairness, for clarification, so the developer wasn't the one that chose not to, like, Konami was the publisher and they stepped away. The developer back then looked to try and sell the game to another publisher to put out, but when Konami publicly stepped down, they couldn't find somebody to take up the game originally and put it out. They eventually put out some. It wasn't the same game, but it was like a similar concept that they ended up getting out in like 2013. I can't remember the name of it now, but they never did get a publisher find a publisher. So it wasn't necessarily the developers. It was more of like they couldn't find a publisher that'd be willing to take on the
what game is
the
this?
risk. It's called 6 Days in Fallujah.
Yeah, I don't know. But it sounds like a dog shit game too. Like, it just sounds like it's a big discussion over a game that's probably gonna get no shine at all. So, like, just make your fucking game.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I don't right now. Like, I don't. So I don't see nearly as much negative surrounding it now as you would have seen back then. And I think that's recency too, right? So like back then, if this game was out in like 08, 09, if that was originally going to be when it popped, or even 07, I mean like Iraq War is so fresh, like it's no wonder there'd be a lot of heat on the game then. Now you're a generation basically separated from the Iraq War beginning, and so I don't think there would be quite as much heat on it in that regard. So much as I think, and I don't think people are interested any more than to, at this point, from what I've seen briefly in the last 2 days anyway, most people just want to see when the game comes out, they want to see how they're portraying it. Because they were marketing themselves as trying to be true to the reality of this battle and this conflict and the moral and ethical crazy shit. Still making it a video game because you don't want to, for example, have this thing where you die once and you're dead because that's war and that's the way war goes. You don't want to. You have to still make it a game. Yeah. But try and present that as a thing. And so, like in terms of like historical context, I personally I'm not against. I'm not against it. It's just like movies take historical battles and they put spins on shit for the sake of artistic license.
Well, I mean, listen, there's tons of shit that make America look bad in movies. There's tons. I could name, half a dozen movies that makes America, like slavery movies. Like, there's some fucking dark shit. And, there are some people that don't want. It's not even like they disagree that it happened. They just don't want to see the truth, right? They don't want to acknowledge the truth. And it can be painful. But I mean, at the same time, it's part of your history. It's like, it's what made you who you are today. And if they want to tell a story in a way, whether it's completely, factual or there's fiction in there, then go ahead and tell your story. It's art. If you don't like it, don't buy it. Tell them with your money. I don't want this.
Yeah. Exactly. I'll be intrigued as to, because to this point I didn't get to look in deep enough to see if it was a complete rebuild or like what they did. They brought in veterans from the Halo team and from the Destiny team, and so there is pedigree for first-person shooters on board of this thing. And I don't know, again, if it's a rebuild or what. So. We will see what eventually comes out. It's coming this year. I don't have a firm release date here. There might be one floating around. I don't have one here, but we'll see. We'll see when it comes out, and I'm sure one way or the other, it will be a spicy topic for the first few days it has landed. Just discussing it more because it's such a recent conflict, and because there's so much war crime shit tied up in that battle specifically that I'm sure it will catch some interesting conversation.